Welcome back to Football Daily. Today we are talking about players your club needs to sign. Okay, last week I did my full 1 to 20 Premier League predictions. If you haven't watched that already, go and watch that. The week before we did a tier list, so I thought for once we're binning off the we need to rank. For once we're going to be doing a one player video. Okay, so no more we need to rank comments. I'll do that next week. So yesterday I put a tweet out asking for your guys' opinions on one player that each Premier League club should sign before the deadline slams shut. And the responses were pretty varied. So I've selected either the most liked, the most commented, or for some clubs, the only name I could find. And we're going to be looking at them and analysing, would they be a good move or would they be a shitter? We're going to start with Arsenal, and the much commented name was that of Pedro Neto from Wolves. Now this one is a bloody interesting one in my opinion, because Arsenal are clearly in the hunt to a level for a right winger. We saw them earlier in the window have that bid rejected for Rafinha. He nearly went to Chelsea, ended up at Barcelona, and they haven't bought in another player since then. So you've got to think somewhere in Edu's plans a right winger does feature. And I bloody love Neto. I know that he can play on both flanks, but I kind of like him on the right when he comes in on that left foot. So maybe be battling for Bukayo Saka with a place. That extra competition would be pretty exciting. However, there are still a few caveats for me about Pedro Neto to a club like Arsenal. First and foremost, he only signed a contract extension at Wolves in March for 5 years. So he ain't coming cheap. And with a huge fee, it also comes along with that serious injury he picked up. The fact that even at his best, and I love Neto, and he's obviously still developing, and when he hit these numbers, he was still very young. He only put up 5 goals and 6 assists, so it would be something of a risk. So personally, I can't see it happening. I think it'd be a really good signing for Arsenal at the right price. I do think they're going to test Fabio Vieira out on that right wing as cover for Bukayo Saka potentially. I saw Mehmet Ali, the Arsenal under-21 coach, saying that when he used Fabio Vieira the other day, he was asked to play him right wing by some of the senior coaches. So maybe that indicates they see him potentially offering some cover on the right. Either way, I don't see it happening. Pedro Neto, I think he costs too much money right now, but he is a fabulous player. Moving on to Aston Villa, and we've got Attila Szalai. That's the pronunciation I'm going with, guys. It's not good. It seems like Villa are going back into the market for another centre-back. Obviously, they lost Diego Carlos to that long-term injury, a ruptured Achilles. That's probably usually 6 months minimum out, isn't it? Which is never good for a brand new signing. And obviously, we've had the well-publicised rumours and news about Tyrone Mings versus Steven Gerrard, although we did see Mings start at the weekend, didn't we? And this is a player who's been hotly tipped to join Chelsea in the past. Let's not forget, as early as January, I think it was. And he is a little bit in that Tyrone Mings, Diego Carlos mould, a left-footed, left-sided centre-back, very physically dominant. I think he is 6'4" tall. But do I see Villa going back into the market for another rangy, physical, left-sided centre-back? I'm not massively convinced. I think that the long-term goal for Villa was probably to move Tyrone Mings out of that role and play Diego Carlos in it, but obviously that's no longer going to be possible, and I'm fully aware, Villa fans, at the weekend we saw Carlos alongside Mings. I'm not sure that was the long-term plan. Otherwise, he wouldn't have stripped Mings of the captaincy. Maybe there's something going on there that I don't know about, so let me know in the comments below, Villa fans. But I would be surprised to see them dip back into the market at a considerable fee. There might be some budget options out there. I just don't think Attila Szalai is going to be that guy. Moving on to Bournemouth then, we won't spend too long talking about him because we've spoken about him in the past. Of course, it's Berta Diaz. You know what? He's got a year left on his contract at Blackburn. I'm still surprised he's at the club. I thought a Premier League side would have picked him up by now. We've seen interest from Everton. We've also seen a bid come in from Nice around the £10 million mark, so it's going to take more than that if Bournemouth want him. Great goal scoring record in the Championship, and it would be a smart pickup for Bournemouth. You know, they cannot rely solely on Dominic Solanke's goal output in the Premier League, as we've seen in the past. So I like this move. Do I think it's going to happen? I do believe Berta Diaz is going to be playing for a Premier League side by the end of the window. I'm just not sure it will be Bournemouth. If Everton come in with the wages and the package, I could see him going there. We also won't spend too much time on Brentford's. We've gone for Matthias Jorgensen. Looks like that's going to happen very quickly if it hasn't happened already by the time this video is shot. Of course, he was at Brentford already, and then I think his contract expired, but he's been remaining there, training at the club. And he's really just defensive cover at this stage, isn't he? You know, Pinnock's out injured, Ayer's out injured. He's a solid defensive backup, and he's already been at the club for a while, knows how to work with Thomas Frank. This is a tap-in. Let's move on to Brighton then. We've got Kamada. Of course, the 26-year-old Japanese forward being suggested a lot. That transfer rumour I've seen doing the rounds, and he would be a great option. Every time I watch Frankfurt, he's a seriously impressive player. I think it was just the 7 goal involvements last season, but the season before that, we're talking about 17. He was so important in that Europa League run. But I'm going to caveat this because he's a consistent underperformer of expected goals. And what team in the league is a consistent underperformer of expected goals? It's Brighton. Do they need Kamada, or do they just need somebody who is just ruthless in the box, consistently overperforming expected goals? You know what? He would be a good signing for. He would be a really good signing, but I don't know whether he's the signing they need. For Chelsea, then there's a few options. I could have picked Wesley Fofana, but I've actually gone for Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang because I feel like he's a slightly more interesting talking point. I think Fofana would be a success, but would be an overpayment. That's about as much as I can say. Whereas Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang feels like he's got so many levels to this deal, doesn't it? That it makes it really interesting. The fact he's worked with Thomas Tuchel in the past, but then his last spell in the Premier League came to a pretty abrupt end. It didn't seem like he was able to enact Mikel Arteta's pressing philosophy, but then Thomas Tuchel wants to be extremely front foot and a high counter press. This is a very interesting transfer, and the fees being mooted, they puzzle me. Because I just don't see Chelsea paying this 25-30 million euros that the Catalan press have been saying Barcelona want. Barcelona picked him up effectively on a sort of terminated contract, and they're expecting Chelsea to pay this 30 million euro fee. We all know that Barcelona need money, and would it not be a case that Chelsea can get him on a cut price rate? It's a very interesting deal to do from so many levels. I do think he would come in and have an impact. I know that sounds bizarre because it just didn't work at Arsenal towards the end and it really did fizzle out, but there's something about a prior connection to Thomas Tuchel, and I think Thomas Tuchel would be accepting slightly more of his, his lateness and some of his Aubameyang antics because he knows how to handle him, if that makes sense. So I think he would probably get them 10 goals, and those 10 goals could be absolutely crucial this season. Despite the fact he would bring off the field baggage, it wouldn't impact Chelsea in the same way it impacted Arsenal, where he was the most senior man in the club. He would just be another star at Chelsea. So I think this is an interesting one. As long as Chelsea don't overpay, if they can get him for the 10 million range, fine. If you're talking 30, no chance. Moving on to Crystal Palace then. I could have done Aaron Wan-Bissaka, but all of the replies were about Houssem Aouar, because apparently they are looking to hijack Nottingham Forest's £15 million move for him. Now, there's a sentence I never thought I'd say. It's an interesting one for Crystal Palace because I suppose what Houssem Aouar would add is this sort of hybrid Bernardo Silva-esque 8-wing role that we actually saw Conor Gallagher occupy at times, and we've seen Eberechi Eze occupy recently, and he would undeniably be an exciting option if you're a Crystal Palace fan, and the fee is almost too good to pass up on. Even if he didn't work at £15 million, Palace fans probably shrug their shoulders. So let's see what the next few days holds for this move, because we know about Aouar that he's an extremely progressive player, that he's extremely creative, very, very neat and tidy on the ball. But what we've seen from Patrick Vieira's sides is he really does like players that are a little bit nitty and gritty. Jordan Ayew is not getting picked for his on-the-ball ability. He's getting picked for the fact that he is a dog defensively, in the same way Conor Gallagher pressed the life out of every human. You wouldn't say the same about Houssem Aouar's output. We're talking a player, extremely low pressures, extremely low tackles, extremely low interceptions. And that might be fine because they might want him to be a little bit more progressive. Let's see. Either way, this is an exciting move. At Everton, everybody was suggesting Armando Broja. I'm going with Broja. I don't know. I don't know about this one. This feels like Frank Lampard used to be involved with Chelsea. Chelsea have a really decent academy graduate striker, put the 2 and 2 together, it will be a success. I'm not convinced. Number 1, I think Chelsea should be keeping Broja. I think their forward options, especially in the striking department, are looking pretty thin right now, and a couple of injuries could happen, and Broja would be a very good option for them in that backup role. I also think his numbers in terms of goal-scoring output weren't that impressive at Southampton. I think his best work was done off the ball and in the press. I think it was only 6 goals last season, wasn't it? And Everton need goals. They just need a goal scorer. Without Dominic Calvert-Lewin, without Richarlison, who's putting the ball in the net? I don't think Broja is that guy. I think he would be a great asset for a team who have a really specific system, like Chelsea under Thomas Tuchel. But Everton, where it's all a bit of a mess, I could see him get slightly lost. Having said that, I'm sure Everton fans will say, well, look at Richarlison, not huge goal involvements, but a real dog, huge work rate. Could he replace Richarlison in that side? Maybe, but then you still need a striker. You still need a Dominic Calvert-Lewin figure. So let's see what happens over the next few days about Armando Broja, but I really expect him to stay at Chelsea. I think it'd be foolish to let him go unless they bring in a striker. Fulham, obviously, people were suggesting Justin Cliver, who is still only 23 years old. It feels like he's been around forever. Of course, he broke into that Ajax side at just 17. He actually enjoyed probably his best season in a senior league last year at Nice, of course, putting up 9 goal involvements, which isn't huge numbers, but he is supposedly on Fulham's radar. There's another name training with Fulham at the moment, Willian, who I would be staring well clear of. Well clear of. What is it with clubs that, I feel like the last good game Willian had was against Fulham. Do you remember that? On his Arsenal debut when he put up 3 assists. In my mind, Fulham have still held on to that and gone, he was good that day, wasn't he? Could do something for us. He's been training with the club, of course. Cliver, it's a total unknown whether or not he could do it in the Premier League. It'd be guessing for me to say anything other than that. Let's go to Leeds then, who are being linked, according to Leeds fans anyway, with Borna Sosa. Of course, the Stuttgart, more of a left wing back than a left back, but left-sided player, and maybe Jesse March believes he can turn him into a left back, an out-and-out one anyway. Now, obviously, Stuttgart fell off a bit of a cliff last season, didn't they? But he did still put up 8 assists, very positive numbers, and he has been linked with some high-profile clubs already this summer. And let's not forget that Leeds do need somebody on that left-hand side after that Stuart Dallas horrendous injury, the broken femur. I've done it myself. It is so difficult to recover from. Pascal Struijk has been playing there. He's been playing there very well, but not his natural position. And obviously, what you would see from Sosa would be much more attacking output than Struijk is going to command, because he's basically a centre-back playing at left-back. Leicester still in the hunt for a goalkeeper. Their fans saying Melier from Leeds. Not happening. Contract is to 2026. We've got 2 weeks left of the window. Leeds are not going to be selling their starting keeper to you. I feel like this is pointless discussing it. Not to hammer Leicester, but what's going on there? Leicester fans, talk to me. Liverpool obviously still in the hunt, well, not according to Jurgen Klopp, but the fans, for a midfielder. The midfield issue remains. We saw quotes, or at least news stories around Naby Keita from Sky Germany this week saying that he wants to leave before the end of the window. They're already very, very thin in there. And Liverpool fans are suggesting Yuri Tielemans, who of course has 1 year left on his contract, and Leicester are looking to get gone for a cut price, believed to be in the region of £30 million. I don't think that's a smart move. I think I am on the side of Jurgen Klopp here, that it's better to wait and get the right player than just say, God, we need somebody in that position, Man United style, who can we get, spend the money, and then regret it because he's on a 5-year deal. And that's not to say Tielemans is a bad player, because I think he's a fabulous footballer, but I don't think he works at all in that mobile Liverpool midfield 3. So I would be extremely surprised to see Tielemans join over the next couple of weeks. And I would be surprised, to be honest with you, to see any midfielder join. Manchester City, none of their fans suggested anyone. So I've found the only rumour I could online, which is Rafa Guerreiro, which is not going to happen because they've just signed a left back. So let's just move swiftly on from City because they've got the most complete squad I've ever seen. And we move on to Manchester United, who have maybe the most incomplete squad I've ever seen. And we have to talk about him, don't we? Casemiro. Now, what an interesting signing this is. I'm just so puzzled how you go from Frenkie de Jong to Rabiot to Casemiro. What? Because despite the fact that United have started the season terribly, I think it's been fairly obvious what Erik ten Hag wants from his pivot. He wants somebody that picks up the ball, can drive the ball forward, can progressively pass or dribble with the ball. Hence, a player like Frenkie de Jong. Casemiro is not that guy. He is a legitimate breakup artist, a facilitator of other players. So there are a couple of reasons I can think of that maybe United have switched their tact to go for him. Number one, maybe Erik ten Hag has thought to himself, do you know what? I'm 2 games into the Premier League season here. I'm quickly realising that it's much more physical than I was anticipating, and I don't think you can just play with that single 6. Or number 2, Manchester United have not been able to get Frenkie de Jong, have gone, oh my God, what other defensive midfielders are available for us? Casemiro, here you go, Eric, deal with that one. Which one do you think is more likely? And that's not to say that I think Casemiro is a bad player, because he's definitely one of the world's better defensive midfielders, but he is 30 years old, he's going to be on a long contract on big wages, and I understand that, Ajax last season played with a facilitator like Edson Alvarez, who then made other players around him better, and that's probably what Casemiro will do, but it just seems like quite short-term planning, when I thought the whole point of appointing Erik ten Hag was long-term vision. Let's see. Newcastle are up next then, and let's talk about Lucas Paquette. Now, I haven't watched loads of Lyon last season, so I asked Euro Expert. If you don't know who Euro Expert is, go on Twitter. Pretty much an expert specifically in Ligue 1, watches 99% of the games. Sensational Twitter account as well. And I asked him, Paquette, thoughts? His reply, I'm going to read it out to you now. I don't want to be dramatic, but I think he's better than Bruno Guimaraes. Now that's a big statement, but it's easy to see why, because this guy is just so versatile. Let's not forget 2021, he was basically playing as a defensive midfielder. Last season, he was everything, everywhere to everyone. At times, he was playing up front. This is an extremely exciting signing if you're Newcastle and you can pull it off, because he just offers so much in so many areas. Do I think they'll pull it off? I'm slightly unconvinced, especially if Houssam Aouar leaves, but let's see. Nottingham Forest are up next then. Obviously, everybody wanted me to talk about Morgan Gibbs Money White. Now, this is genuinely quite interesting, isn't it? Because yesterday, how much was trending on Twitter with 260,000 tweets when he was announced, or David Ornstein announced, his move to Nottingham Forest was pending to the tune of 42.5 million. Now, I've got the breakdown of numbers in front of me here. David Ornstein saying final numbers for Morgan Gibbs White: £25 million up front and guaranteed, 7 to 10 million in likely add-ons, and the remainder more difficult to achieve, but up to a maximum of £42.5 million for Morgan Gibbs White, who was good last season in the Championship, 20 goal involvements. Some would say he was very good at Sheffield United. But what Wolves have done here is they've signed Mateus Nunes and Gonzalo Guedes, and they've sold Morgan Gibbs White plus £15 million for it. That's incredible business. Now, he has been Nottingham Forest's #1 target in that midfield area, I would say, pretty much all summer. I know they've brought in the likes of Jesse Lingard, but he's also played under Steve Cooper before, hasn't he, at Swansea. It's going to be very interesting to see where he plays under Steve Cooper, given that Jesse Lingard is in that side. I wonder also if this means the move for Houssam Aouar is going to be binned off and he ends up at Palace, but it's just so much money. And it's a United fan talking. This is huge figures for a newly promoted side who have just made their 16th signing. At Southampton, let's talk about James Garner. That was the name the Southampton fans wanted me to mention, who is mooted to cost them between £15 million and £20 million. They are in advanced negotiations, of course. Ralph Hasenhüttl on very shaky ground. We saw reports earlier in the week that some of the star players kind of aren't convinced about him anymore, and we have seen a whole new tack taken by the ownership of signing these young academy stars, the likes of Romeo Lavia, the likes of Gavin Bazunu in goal, Tino Livramento before him. Could Garner be that next guy? I think it's quite likely, especially if Oriol Romeo leaves the club. I know Southampton fans don't want him to go, but it looks like he's going to go. Garner in, Romeo out. It's another big risk, man. And I'm not sure, in the short term anyway, if it's going to pay off for Hasenhüttl. I hope it doesn't cost him his job, But this is a big ask to get a lot out of this young squad. Let's do Tottenham next then. And the fans said Zaniolo. I would be surprised at this late stage. I would be very surprised if Roma let him go at this late stage. They must have one of the most exciting front threes in Serie A with Zaniolo, Dybala and Tammy Abraham. It would cost huge figures to get him out of Italy right now. As much as Antonio Conte might have that Italian connection, Italian pull, I don't see it happening for the 23-year-old. And I understand that Spurs need a creative midfielder and want somebody that can contribute in the way of goals from midfield. Do I see that being Zaniolo? I don't. And I know that there's lots of Spurs fans on this tweet were also saying, oh, can you talk about a centre-back? I've got images of Cristian Romero turning up again in a week after those Conte comments yesterday. All this stuff about him being out for 4 to 6 weeks. Conte yesterday basically said that they're just not risking him. I just don't trust it. West Ham then, now I've never heard of this guy before, which is probably poor ball knowledge, but Hans Van Aken, they've already had a bid rejected for him. He's a central midfielder, plays on the left-hand side. If there are any Club Brugge fans in the comments right now, let me know what you think of him. But he's obviously a mainstay in the side. Plenty of games, plenty of goal involvements. I think last season it was 20 goal involvements from midfield. And he seems like a bit of a leader, which is exactly what David Moyes wants from his players. He would obviously come in as cover. It's going to be an interesting one because we saw Alex Crowell come in on loan last year and not get any game time whatsoever. But could Hans Van Aken be the Mark Noble replacement? I don't know. I literally don't know. I've never seen the guy play. At Wolves, we should talk about Gonzalo Ramos. Wolves need a striker. They do need a striker. They've had a great week in the window. A great week, Mateus Nunes and Gonzalo Guedes, and then selling Morgan Gibbs White for such a huge fee. It's sensational business, but they do still need a striker. Is Gonzalo Ramos that guy? He's a massively hard worker off the ball, but not the best in the penalty box. I think it's just 7 goals last season in 17 Liga NOS games. However, when Jimenez comes back, it's just competition. And for the fees being mooted, I don't think it's bad competition. Taking 90% of his shots inside the box. If you can get Pedro Neto, Gonzalo Guedes, Pedence in and around him, Hwang in and around him, it might be a recipe for a bit of a nightmare for opposition. So, great week for Wolves. And if they can get Gonzalo Ramos over the line as the striker, it will have been even more better. It will have been even more better? It will have been even better. Alright, so that's it for another episode of We Need to Talk. That was me looking at one player each Premier League club should sign before deadline day, thanks to your suggestions for them. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, hit subscribe, go back and watch last week's video, my predictions. Thanks very much for watching. See you later. Bye.